Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And while you two are over here HJing each other, I got a reservation for Dorsia Friday at 8:30.
Oh man, Dorsia. Nice. I should have looked up, was Dorsia a real restaurant? I feel like that was an important detail that I should have looked up.
I'm going to do it right now. Vamp, Josh.
All right. I will. What is the deal with Dorsia? Well, in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the films of the year 2000.
The quick answer is no. Dorsia is not a real restaurant. However, Dorsia has become so legendary among fans that its fictional status hasn't stopped people from trying to get a reservation.
Oh,
nice.
Maybe some sort of pop-up promotional event that will bring Dorsia to life.
That would be great. Yeah. We can all pass out layered business cards with different fonts and, kind of grains to it.
Jason should do one of his comedy nights.
Pop-up Eat this Dorsia. Comedy at Dorsia, or that Mexican place where they serve mud soup or whatever.
So this film is our producer David Rosen's pick. Dave, what did you pick for us?
I picked American Psycho.
American Psycho. And why did you do that?
Well, I think this has happened before with my picks where it's like a movie that I remember being one of my favorite movies, but I also have not seen it in maybe close to 20 years. And so I was just really excited to revisit it and see how it holds up.
All right. Yeah, I hadn't seen it in that long as well, close to that long, I think. So also found it fun to revisit. And it's certainly a divisive film here. Mm-hmm. Maybe not among us, but it was at the time that it was released, certainly.
People are
just getting it made. Jason has no patience for that.
I mean, going back to Cruising, we've seen things like this. It's like, it's a movie. Let's enjoy it or not enjoy it based on the merits of the film.
I agree. I think with Cruising, it was a little different because there was a minority group that was concerned about potential actual harm, but that's not the case here.
That is the case. They think it's anti-women and promoting violence against women here.
Well, that was, I think, more the book than the film, and the fact that we have women as the director and co-writer here, I think, probably made a big difference with this film. But the book by Bret Easton Ellis had been very controversial as well, and only sold in shrink wrap and things like that, as if it's gonna like leap out and hurt people or something.
Like those nudie mags behind the counter at the gas station. Not the classy ones like Playboy, Josh. I'm talking Jugs or Beaver Bait. I don't think that's a real magazine, but it could be now.
No, it's Jugs is real though. So
2 G's.
Right, exactly. I feel like we've somehow talked about that magazine multiple times on this show.
Probably on our Woods Porn episode.
Yeah, Jason always brings it back to Woods Porn.
Hey, it's the late 80s. This is prime time for Woods Porn right here.
I was going to say maybe the American Psycho book could be like in among the Woods Porn because it's so naughty, or was considered that way.
Erotic, explicit, and a bit secretive.
Yeah. So despite all that, this was a pretty successful film. It had premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2000, and although it did get very divisive responses from critics and from audiences, it grossed $34.3 million on its budget of $7 million. So, I mean, this is not the kind of movie that's going to be a massive blockbuster, but considering that it also didn't have a very large budget, I think that's a pretty decent result.
I mean, this was the time when this type of thing, you remember the buzz about it and everything. And so you did think it was going to get some type of audience, right? But this is still like indie movies are cool, or like kind of, I don't even know if this would be considered an indie, but like kind of the tiles of like Fox Searchlight or whatever it is, like the kind of independent wings of studios.
Right. And this was financed, I believe, like somewhat independently. So although those audiences went to see it, they did not like it. It got a D from CinemaScore, the audience polling service. And as we always say, those are the people who were the most excited to see it, who went opening night, and they hated it. Although getting a grade that low is kind of a badge of honor. And I would have to imagine that Mary Harron, the director and co-writer here, would probably have been even happier if this had gotten an F, because it's, feeding into the whole controversial nature of it.
Oh, yeah. You definitely want an F over a D, Josh.
Yeah. But the D is still, that's still fairly rare. The F CinemaScore is very rare. There's only a handful of movies that have gotten that. But still, usually when you poll the people who most wanted to see a movie, even if they were disappointed, they're not giving it a score that low. So people were outraged here, which is, again, what you want, I think, out of a film like this.
Right. It's a visceral reaction. You're either in or you're out, buddy.
And critics also were divided, either in or out. Roger Ebert, however, was all in on this movie. He said, "The film and the book are notorious because Patrick Bateman murders a lot of people in nasty ways. I have overheard debates about whether some of the murders are fantasies. All of the murders are equally real or unreal, and that isn't the point. The function of the murders is to make visible the frenzy of the territorial male when his will is frustrated. You can see why Mary Harron has called the film, quote, feminist. So it is, and a libel against the many sane, calm, and civilized men it does not describe. But it's true to a type, all right. It sees Bateman in a clear, sharp, satiric light, and it despises him. Christian Bale is heroic in the way he allows the character to leap joyfully into despicability. There is no instinct for self-preservation here, and that is one mark of a good actor."
Yeah, I think this is when I'm going back to leave this movie alone, you babies, and that type of stuff, right? I never take any of these as oh, this is an archetype for a whole group. I just took him as an individual character.
Right. I think it is meant to be a commentary on toxic masculinity, and even more specifically, this finance culture.
Yeah, the yuppie culture of the 80s.
Right. And not only in the 80s, but continuing into the year 2000 and continuing into now. And so it's not just this one particular person. He is meant to be a representation of a kind of culture and a kind of attitude, but that doesn't mean he's meant to represent every man. I think maybe, Ebert is a little overly sensitive there, even though he's very positive about the film. And I think there's nothing wrong with watching a movie like this and making you think about behaviors that are less extreme than Patrick Bateman's, but are is this along the spectrum? And of course, I think we talked about this when we did our episode on Fight Club. This is one of those movies where people take the wrong message, and no one should admire Patrick Bateman, just like they shouldn't be admiring Tyler Durden, but that there are people who do.
Yeah, well, what a surprise, Josh. Yeah, like you're saying, all these crazy things, Rolex made them change the line from don't touch the Rolex to don't touch the watch. Cerruti 1881 wouldn't allow them to wear their clothing during the murder scenes. It's we're being a little too literal with this made-up movie based upon a made-up book.
Right. It's not surprising that big brand names are we don't want to be associated with murder, or be associated with the favorite thing of a guy who murders a bunch of people. I think that's more understandable than moviegoers kind of missing the message of the movie entirely.
Yeah, there you go, Josh, defending corporate America yet again. You're a stooge.
No, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying I know that that's how corporations operate. And in fact, I was somewhat surprised that they managed to get not only all of those brand names in here, even if there's certain moments where they have to leave them out, but all of the big name musicians that Patrick Bateman name checks that are so key to his character, and they get the songs. They're able to license Huey Lewis and the News and Genesis and Phil Collins, and those people signed off on having their music not only be in this movie, but be the favorite of this murder.
Has anyone ever, let's take the music, for example, right? He's playing Hip to Be Square, right, in the background of a murder, right? At one point, is that correct?
Yes.
Has anyone ever watched this movie and been oh, now I won't listen to Huey Lewis and the News anymore because Hip to Be Square was playing in the background of a fake murder in a fake movie based on a fake book. Like, come on, dude. Like, that's ridiculous to me.
No, yeah, of course not if you're a fan of Huey Lewis in the News. But not only is he talking about Huey Lewis while he's murdering people, but the point of his monologues about all the music is that his musical taste is based on like wanting to be as mainstream and conformist as possible. And by implication, he's saying that this music is the most corporate music. It's the music equivalent of the the Rolex watch and the fancy suit or whatever that is just part of his constructed personality so that he can fit in.
Oh, Josh, you want to talk about the real indie merits of sport?
No, I don't. I don't necessarily, but I'm just saying that if you are Huey Lewis or Phil Collins and you have some musical integrity, maybe artistic integrity, let's say, this isn't exactly the best endorsement of your music as music, murder aside.
Yeah, I just don't think anyone's changing opinions based on this. Like,
No.
Huey Lewis has some good songs. Phil Collins has some good songs. They both have some not so good songs, but this didn't make me go one way or the other. In fact, I would think the opposite. Like, maybe if you weren't aware of like Genesis Phil Collins and you heard Susu Studio or something in the background, you'd be like, oh, I need to look up more stuff by this guy in this band.
No, see, I don't think that. I feel like what you're saying as someone who's familiar with this music, it's not going to change your opinion, right? But if you don't know that music and you hear it for the first time within the context of not only it being the favorite music of this murderer, but it being emblematic of like soullessness and corporate greed, you're not going to think, oh, I should check this music out.
Yet again, Josh, you are forgetting that people look favorably on soullessness and corporate greed. So,
yeah, no, I suppose. Dave, as a musician, would you have wanted Patrick Bateman to talk about your music as his favorite?
Whatever gets my music licensed, I'm down.
Nobody's music's more soulless than Dave's.
Oh, right. Thank you, Jason. So, not every critic loved this movie. Kenneth Turan in the Los Angeles Times was not a fan at all.
Here we go. Turan in the house.
Yeah, your favorite.
No cover band.
No Duran in this film, although I feel like they would have fit in perfectly.
Hungry Like the Wolf would have been a good one for this.
Yeah, right? Bateman would definitely be a Duran fan. But Turan was not a fan of this film. He said, promotional blather about its satiric thrusts notwithstanding, the bottom line is that this film is 100 minutes spent with an unpleasant, unmotivated, disconnected psychopath named Patrick Bateman, who enjoys hacking folks into pieces and storing body parts in a freezer, which is pretty much 100 minutes too many. The difficult truth is that the more viewers can model themselves after protagonist Bateman, the more they can distance themselves from the human reality of the slick violence that fills the screen and take it all as some kind of a cool joke, the more they are likely to enjoy this stillborn, pointless piece of work.
Well, Josh, I mean, unpleasant maybe, but unmotivated. I mean, this guy goes and does all the kills that he was planning on doing. And more than we even saw, is plenty motivated here.
Right. I mean, and also like his routine of hygiene, all the beauty products that he uses.
The working out, he's very motivated,
Yeah.
Go-getter.
I was thinking that as I was watching. One thing he says at the beginning is that he can do 1,000 crunches. And I was just like, that must take so long. Like just counting to 1,000 would take a really, really long time.
Hey, I used to do 500 crunches a day in like 8th grade. And
how long did that take you?
I mean, maybe an hour or whatever, but maybe less. But I can still I'm not in that shape anymore, but the muscles are still there underneath all this, Josh.
The muscles are there. Yeah, they haven't disappeared. I don't know if they're in the ability to do any of those things. But that's impressive. I think I didn't realize that you were nearly in Patrick Bateman shape when we were in high school.
Well, my beauty routine wasn't as kind of in depth, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, but your fitness routine there, that's
pretty good.
Impressive.
I was a big baller, dude. So
yeah, I don't know if I could have done like 5 crunches back then.
I don't think you could do 5 now.
Yeah, well, neither could you.
No, I totally could.
Okay.
You don't lose that, Josh. So,
Let's have a crunch off.
Dave, put this on YouTube. I'll do 100 crunches right now.
Hell yeah.
All right. I feel like this is where we're getting into comparing business cards territory here on the podcast. So finally, Owen Gleiberman in Entertainment Weekly also liked this. He said, funny, pungent, and weirdly gripping, American Psycho is a satire that feels like a hallucination. Its tone of rambunctious, light-fingered malevolence is closer to late Buñuel or the Kubrick of The Shining than it is to Bret Easton Ellis. Yet Mary Harron, if anything, is an even more devious provocateur than Ellis was. By treating the book as raw material for an exuberantly perverse exercise in 80s nostalgia, she recasts the go-go years as a template for the casually brainwashing consumer/fashion/image culture that emerged from them. She has made a movie that is really a parable of today.
I mean, that's what Wall Street was, and that what took place at that time. It's not, she didn't reinvent the wheel here, right?
No, but I mean, I think he's right that everything in this film applies beyond the 80s. It applies, again, to that time period, and it applies to now, and that's why we can watch the movie now and still, I think, appreciate it. I guess I didn't remember much of anything about this film, but I definitely didn't remember how funny it is. Like, it's a great satire. It's really, I mean, we were talking about those monologues about the music, but those are hilarious. And the way Christian Bale delivers them with this weird earnestness is very funny.
Yeah, they nailed all those, stock bro guys, right? Like that whole group is really brings it in every level. You feel like they're very committed to these restaurant reservations and one-upping each other on the business cards and all that. Like they're really in it to win it on the most trivial of things.
Yeah, and I think you got to get those details. I mean, as much as they're mocking, of course, the character's obsession with their business cards that basically look identical, you want a filmmaker who pays that kind of attention to detail here to get things right.
Shows what this guy knows, right? They look identical. This guy doesn't appreciate a raised grain at all, does he?
No. So Dave, you first watched this when it came out?
Yeah, and you reading the Ebert review, I feel like that review is what made me watch it, because I didn't know any of these people. I certainly wasn't aware of Christian Bale yet, and was just absolutely blown away by him at the time. I'm sure 20-year-old Dave's favorite actor became Christian Bale like right away.
Oh, not just Dave, because Mary Harron went to bat for Bale. This is one of those really storied pre-production deals where first it's going to be Bale. No, now it's Oliver Stone because Harron won't do it without a Bale, and we've offered $20 million to Leo DiCaprio, and all these different names keep coming up there. But Todd Haynes had just directed Bale in Velvet Goldmine, and he told Mary Harron that Christian Bale's the best actor he ever worked with.
Yeah, and this is like one of those performances, I think, where when we talk about Christian Bale as like this archetype of the really super committed actor, I think this is one that people think of because he immerses himself so well in this role. Yeah. It's scary,
right?
And as it should be.
One of those situations where Bale stayed in character the entire shoot and barely talked to anyone and really got all into it. But it pays off on screen, Josh.
It does. So, Jason, did you see this when it came out?
Yeah, I remember my old roommate Dymo. Shout out Dymo, that Diamond. He was very excited for this. And, this is when we were all in college and we loved seeing these kind of subversive kind of indie movies. And I think we saw this in a screening, but I think that's the only time I've seen it.
Yeah, I think I didn't see it in theaters, but probably saw it later on, having rented it or whatever. And I might have come to it more from like the horror angle because I was into horror movies a lot. I mean, and I still am. But I think especially then it was always like, oh, this is the most extreme thing. And this is a movie that was known, right? They had to cut 18 seconds out of it in order to get an R rating, which is silly. But still, it's talked about that way in that, oh, this is controversial. This is extreme. It was going to, forbidden or whatever. And any movie like that, even ones that turned out to be really bad, I would always want to watch.
What's so funny is the 18 seconds were from the sex scene, the three-way, right? And it's like, got to cut that. But, all this murder keep that all in there, right? Because it's America and we don't give a fuck about one of these, but the other one's important, right? The other thing is, Josh, you're talking about this as a horror movie. I know there's the one sequence where the prostitute kind of sees that the other person in the threesome's being murdered, and she runs through and finds all these bodies. But to me, this is one of the least horror movies that there ever is. In fact, I'm watching it and I'm like, I want to see more kills. I want to see more violence. Like, I want to go all in on this stuff. So I don't even consider this a horror movie.
No, I mean, I would agree with you. I'm just saying at the time, I think it was considered that. And it was a thing among horror movie fans that was being talked about. But yeah, watching it now, I don't think I would label this a horror movie. It is a dark comedy. It's a satire. I guess you could call it a thriller, but it's not horror. It really doesn't fit that definition at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So anything else you want to say about the background of this film, Jason?
American Psycho was a book I didn't think needed to be turned into a movie, as the medium of film demands answers, which would make the book infinitely less interesting, says Bret Easton Ellis, who has come around and says the movie's okay.
Yeah, he still, I think, doesn't love it. But I feel like this movie, people see it far more than they read that book, even though the book was very well known at the time. That it came
in
out.
General, people see movies more than they read books.
Well,
Josh.
right. But I think the movie's reputation has maybe overshadowed the book's reputation. And none of us have read that or any Bret Easton Ellis books. Right?
No, I mean, the opposite would be Less Than Zero, which is a big mess, they say, of film and a great book. But there is a really good podcast about the Bret Easton Ellis and that like kind of East Coast elite, even though he's from LA, but that like kind of college East Coast elite. When they were, I think it's called One Time at Bennington College, when they were all there in the 80s, and just kind of what a wild time they had, these cads, Josh.
Yeah, as we see maybe in The Rules of Attraction, another Bret Easton Ellis adaptation.
Better movie, a good movie too.
Yeah, with Patrick Bateman's a character who's meant to be Patrick Bateman's brother.
So Jason Bateman.
Yeah, Sean Bateman, I think, is the name of the character. It's the James Vanderbeek character in that film. So we'll come back in a moment and talk more of our general thoughts on American Psycho. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of the year 2000, we're talking about our producer David Rosen's pick, American Psycho. And Dave, do you want to say more? Say more about what do you love about this film? And did you love it watching it now after such a long time?
Yeah, I thought it held up beautifully. I thought the satire is just as strong now as it was back then. And I just love how crazy this character is. I love his kind of struggle to fit in with his coworkers and just where that takes him. And I love Christian Bale in this. I just think he is just so damn good and so watchable. I think, like you were saying, it is very funny. And I found myself like cracking up a lot throughout this movie. And I think it does a really great job of the, what is real, what isn't real kind of mixture. Whereas, we see that a lot in a lot of different movies, and sometimes it just kind of feels cop-out-ish. But here, I just feel like it really works and helps to accent the point of everything.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Was the one thing I think I found disappointing this time. And I did quite enjoy it. And I think the first time I saw it, because I was saying I came at it, I think, from the perspective of, oh, this is so controversial and it's so extreme. And maybe I was a little disappointed coming at it from that perspective. I didn't remember a whole lot about it, but I think I remember being slightly underwhelmed. But I thought it was really entertaining this time. And the things you're pointing out, like I said, especially the humor, the satire, Christian Bale's performance is so good. But I think when it gets to that point late in the film where suddenly you're like, wait a minute, none of this is maybe real. And I think Bret Easton Ellis has talked about this a little too, where his point in the book was that the whole time you're thinking, and the book is told in the first person from Patrick Bateman's perspective, like, is any of this true? Is he making this up? And I feel like the movie gives it to you at face value until all of a sudden it doesn't, and it just didn't quite work for me.
The book attempted to add ambiguity to the events and to Bateman's reliability as a narrator. The film appeared to make them completely literal before confusing the issue at the very end, I believe is a Ellis quote there, Josh.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I haven't read the book, so I don't know if I would think it works in the book, but the way it's presented in the movie, I think that's the case, is that you don't really have a reason to think that it's not real for the first 3/4 of the movie, and then suddenly it switches, and I don't know that I quite.
I agree. You really don't get that till that one scene where he confronts the lawyer about the message that he left, and I don't know. I mean, maybe that's part of the scripting, but I liked the movie, but I think I had issues with the direction, and that's one of the issues I had because I think, like for instance, David Cronenberg was one of the people who was once attached to it, and don't get me wrong, he wanted to cut all the restaurant and nightclub stuff, which I think is essential to this movie. But
Yes.
I think that kind of like hazy, dreamlike state of, Dave, you love Charlie Kaufman, and this is like the anti-Charlie Kaufman, and here you are HJing it while I'm at Dorsia.
Yes, absolutely. No, I hear what you guys are saying, but to me, it just really worked. Like I like that it just kind of gets that shift at the end, and a third act shift like that could very easily not work, and to me, it just did.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't kill the movie for me. I still enjoyed the movie, and I think there are some entertaining elements to that part of it. When he picks up the kitten and suddenly he looks at the ATM and it says, "Feed me a kitten." And I'm like, oh man, are they going to have Patrick Bateman kill a kitten? Like, oh, really?
He kicks a dog. So,
yeah, he does.
So, I mean, it wasn't even that I disliked that part. It was just the shift, I think, didn't work and made me sort of wonder about if maybe like earlier in the film, we were supposed to be questioning what was going on and it's not conveying that properly. Or are we supposed to think like some of it was real and now he's had this break with reality and what happened subsequently is not real? And I mean, I'm sure Mary Harron would say like, it doesn't matter. Like the point is for you to wonder, but I just felt like it didn't establish that well enough. Whereas someone like David Cronenberg, like Jason says, is very good, I think, in films like Existenz, for example, of establishing this off-kilter nature from the beginning where you never really know what's really going on.
I want to add to that because I'm watching this and I feel like, that I just feel like there's so much meat left on the bone here, right? Because I'm thinking Wolf of Wall Street, with the humor and everything. I wanted it to go that far. I wanted it to go that into the 80s. I was thinking about guys like, like I said, Scorsese, Wolf of Wall Street, with Stillman in Metropolitan, really leaning into that time period. And the, not that Metropolitan's weird, but the weirdness and the kind of singularity of that time even more. That's what I wanted. And I know you're going to say, well, Jason, you just mentioned two men. But I was also thinking of Sofia Coppola with Virgin Suicide. So your face, Josh. That's what I have to say about that.
I think Sofia Coppola was... I don't know what year.
99.
Okay,
Your face,
so I guess
Josh.
she was just starting out. But no, I mean, I disagree with you. Not necessarily because of the idea that those directors are men. Although I do think that it seems like bringing that female perspective here made a difference. But not having read the book, I can't say what exactly she changed. I think she does a really good job up until that point. And like I said, I don't think she does a bad job with what comes afterwards. I just think the way it shifts and the integration between those elements isn't effective. But all the satirical stuff I thought was great. I wouldn't want it to go harder than that. And I like this more than The Wolf of Wall Street, which I'm not really a big fan of.
Well, yeah, but you hate men.
With Leonardo DiCaprio as the lead there. And he's very good in that. But I think you watch The Wolf of Wall Street, you see his performance there. And to me, that emphasized that he would not have been the right person for this role. And The Wolf of Wall Street is based on a true story, and they're definitely making sure to keep it grounded in a level of realism that is not going on here. And I mean, I don't know, talking about Scorsese, the movie I would think of related to this is like Bringing Out the Dead.
Yeah. King of Comedy also, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, with the unhinged lead character. I love King of Comedy, but I feel like Bringing Out the Dead is one of the least successful Scorsese movies, in part because that dreamlike quality is not something that he captures very well there.
Well, Shutter Island, I mean, is a visually beautiful dream piece. I would have to go and rewatch the film to see it, as I know that's one of these films that's been reassessed. Remember our third podcast coming after Feel the Burns.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, and I think that I think I agreed with you on that it had some cool visuals, but it was kind of undercooked as a story. But I mean, all of that is to say, not that any of those people that you're mentioning are not good or couldn't have done a good job with this, but I don't think we need to throw Mary Harron under the bus because of that. Like, she does a very good job. She was the right choice here. And just because maybe is an aspect that doesn't quite work for me doesn't mean that she did a poor job or that she was the wrong person to take this on.
Agreed. I think she does a good job. I just think that, it could have hit another level for me. And, maybe that's a different director. Maybe not. I don't know. So.
Yeah. What were some of your favorite aspects, Jason?
I mean, like Bale and the stock bros are great, right? The music's great. I love that his excuse for everything is always he's got to return videotapes. That's one of my favorite things. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a fun movie. I just think there was like, I wanted to see the kills. Like, it really bothered me with that chainsaw kill that we did, where he drops the chainsaw off the stairwell and it like kind of slices the woman who's running away in half, like 5 stories down. And that's already after we've seen her run through the apartment of horrors. Like, that was what I mean by meat left on the table. I think that's a kill you want to see.
I mean, I think that's done on purpose because she doesn't want to.
I know it was done on purpose. I just said I want to see it. I didn't say she.
So you wanted to wallow in violence. You were feeling the Patrick Bateman bloodlust.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the movie that I'm going to go see, like, let me see it, bro.
But that isn't the movie. I think that's part of the point. Is that like people were expecting something like that. Like, I was expecting something like that back when I saw it, right, as this extreme horror movie. But that's not what she's doing. And she's not removing the violence, but she is keeping it off screen because the point is Patrick Bateman's unhinged nature and not to feel audience bloodlust for the people that he's going to kill.
Even she says, like, they wanted one classic horror sequence where you see the bodies and you see the murder and everything. And that's part of that sequence. That's really the end of that sequence. So I think that would have capped off that one sequence nicely. I'm not saying I needed to see Paul get chopped up by an axe or this or that, but like, that was the one where I'm like, oh man, that really would have put the cherry on top here. But that's just me, Josh. What do I know?
Yeah, no, you have a thirst for women getting chopped up by chainsaws.
I mean, I would have been fine seeing the men die too, like with stuff like that.
Right. No, just a general interest in
a bloodlust
getting hacked up. Bloodlust, right, exactly. And I mean, I feel that, like, I watch a lot of horror movies and it can be very entertaining to watch these over the top kill scenes, but I just didn't feel like that was something I was missing in this film. There was so much else going on, and that was an aspect of it. And I think holding back and then showing you that house of horrors, as you said, that the prostitute suddenly discovers all these bodies in closets and refrigerators and whatever, it has a greater impact because you finally realize like how much killing he's been doing.
Yes, but I'm saying, Josh, that one comes after that. So if you had held back and then you saw those corpses, and then at the end of that, you saw this, chainsaw spiral through the air and chop this lady in half, that elevates that whole sequence and all of that, holding it back even more. Like, that's the one that would have been like, oh, now we see it. And now we can even imagine more on this other stuff. I'm saying that was a missed opportunity, Josh.
I mean, I guess, but I did not ever think that during that scene.
Dave?
I just love that back in the early days of doing this podcast, Jason was always the kind of not really that into horror guy. And now he wants to see women chopped up and like graphic details.
I mean, if it was a male prostitute, I would have wanted to see that too.
Right. No.
Sure.
We're going to establish that. Jason is looking for people of all genders to be chopped up.
I'm equal opportunity.
We could all agree we'd love to see Jared Leto get killed on camera. We can
there are so many Letterboxd reviews of this that just say like, good for Patrick Bateman for murdering Jared Leto.
He's very good. He's very good in this too, Jared Leto.
Yeah, he's fine.
Smarmy,
I mean,
bro.
He's good at playing. It's a very good part for him. But it's just people really hate Jared Leto.
But I'll tell you who I really like, and I think really had a great kind of few years here was Matt Ross, who played Lewis, the douchey one that they all hate, and that Bateman is going to go and like strangle. And when he puts his hands around his neck, he goes, "Oh, I feel it too. I've been wanting you for so long," right? And he just creeps him out to the point of like, I'm not even going to murder this guy because he wants to bang me, right? That guy is, he's good in Last Days of Disco around that time and everything. He's a really fun character actor of that period. And don't get me wrong, for all you witheads out there, he's no Chris Eggleston, but this will work.
You mean Chris Eichmann? Chris
Yeah.
Eccleston was Doctor Who.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Sorry, Whitheads. We got to get to Whit Stillman at this point.
Yeah. No, I mean, he is good. And I think it's great too. Like after this, he went on, to be part of another great satire of a different kind of corporate culture when he had a main role on Silicon Valley, and he plays like the head of the, Google company where he's also completely up his own ass or whatever. So, I mean, if you made American Psycho now and it took place in 2024, obviously Patrick Bateman would work at a tech company.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also, great name, Lewis Carruthers.
Yeah, good character names. But yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of, we talked about Bale, and Bale is fantastic in this. I love the sex scene with the prostitutes where all he's doing is looking at himself in the mirror and flexing because, of course, the only sexual attraction that Patrick Bateman actually has is to himself.
Yeah, my friend Jeremy Flores, comedian, had this great joke of like, I like pornos in the 80s because they would never look at the women. They would just look at themselves in the mirror. And that's like what that reminded me of. Josh, what about the women? I know, they're kind of moving pieces and kind of plot devices here. I think we could have got a little more from Reese Witherspoon. We got that one great scene with the breakup and she's just breaking down crying.
Well, she's not. What's great about that scene, I was watching this and she's making this huge scene in the restaurant because he's breaking up with her and she's like whimpering and whatever. And then you see her and there are no tears whatsoever because she's just as much a phony as Patrick Bateman is.
Yeah, everyone is. I think we could have seen that a little. I mean, and there's the one that he's having the Carruthers girlfriend that he's having the affair with. And he says he's taking her to Dorsia and they go to this like really crappy empty place. And she goes, "Are you sure this is Dorsia or whatever?" And I just thought, I mean, I get why there wasn't more with them, but I think again we could have painted a fuller picture with some more stuff with them.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I imagine there's even less of that in the book because it's all from Patrick Bateman's first person perspective, and he obviously does not care about these women at all. But I think those performances, Reese Witherspoon, Samantha Mathis, who plays the kind of drugged out Lewis's girlfriend that Bateman is having an affair with, and especially Chloë Sevigny, who plays his secretary, who does get a really good scene where she kind of reveals some stuff about her character when he brings her to his apartment and he's obviously thinking about killing her and then he decides not to. I feel like she's the one who you get a little bit about her as an actual character in that scene. And Chloë Sevigny is quite good.
I agree with that, Josh. I have a weird, there was an email campaign, right, to help market this movie, which were fake emails that Bateman sent to his therapist, which already is a bad idea, right? And Christian Bale spoke out against this campaign and was like, "This is unnecessary. The movie's the movie. We don't need this." And in that campaign, it's said that he gets married and divorced from Jean. He's got a kid, Patrick Jr., that he loves. This whole idea of him getting married to Jean after she goes through his notebook just felt so off base to me. When she sees like his murder notebook and all the things he wants to do to women, I don't see why she would ever marry him. It just is a bad marketing ploy right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad idea because they're like creating new story material for a movie that's been carefully crafted and they're just tossing it off as a marketing campaign. On the other hand, I feel like if you actually did make a sequel and assuming that Patrick Bateman was still alive and was not in prison, that part of his whole deal is, right, living that perfect conformist life. He would definitely get married and have children because that's like what you do.
That's not what I was talking about it from the Jean perspective, that she would never marry him based on what she's learned about him.
You see, I wonder that too, because part of her whole character is she's like, I can save him. Right. I mean, I could see her doing that and being really concerned about him and saying like, "Patrick, I'm going to help you," and thinking that she can somehow reform him. And of course, she would not be able to. But I could buy that.
Yeah. Any women looking to save someone, holler at your boy.
Yeah. Jason's more redeemable than Patrick Bateman. I'll vouch for that.
I don't have any murder notebooks, Josh.
No, not that we know of.
No.
So
I literally do from my comedy rap days.
Did you draw pictures of people getting murdered, Dave?
Probably. I don't really remember, but that seems like something I'd do.
He remembers.
Like Patrick Bateman. Yeah. Jason, I wanted to ask, you're a foodie. And the dishes they order in these ridiculously high-end restaurants, are those meant to sound like real dishes that people would want to eat? Or is there absurdity and like disgustingness part of the point? Because I can't tell.
No, I mean, also you're talking about the 80s when this kind of foodie culture, I guess, proliferated with like the idea of I got to go to this spot and eat this and ooh, goat cheese. Isn't that something? Right. So I mean, really the only one that jumped out at me as not being anything was mud soup. I don't know what that is or whatnot, but everything else sounded like it could be a thing to me.
Okay. Yeah. Cause to me, I'm like, these sound horrifyingly disgusting. And I don't know if they're meant to be that or they are meant to be like, people would really like gourmet, people would really be excited to eat this stuff. It sounds very high end.
Yeah.
Like the suits.
I think it works like The Menu, the movie, The Menu, where it's like, sometimes you just want a cheeseburger and these guys are always looking for, whatever offbeat, 7-syllable dish they can find with 50 ingredients. Right.
Right. Yeah. We should talk about the business card scene, right? I mean, I think, is that the most famous scene from this movie? I feel like that's what's most memed or whatever. Is that fair to say?
This is a memed, this is a new life with the memes on this movie, right? There's a whole generation. I wonder if there are a lot of people who are like, look at these cool memes and don't even realize that it's from this movie. So
I think that's the case for any movie that is heavily memed.
I mean, the business card scene is the best one of that representation of what's important to this culture and how you kind of achieve status in this world. That, along with the idea that using the Jared Leto character, he's always figuring that the Bateman character is a different guy. They're all interchangeable type thing.
Yeah.
Right. And that happens again with the lawyer when he pours out that huge confession on the answering machine. And then he sees the lawyer the next day and the lawyer doesn't even realize that he's Patrick Bateman. He thinks he's somebody else.
Right. Bateman would never do that. He's such a wimp or whatever.
Right. So. Exactly. But yeah, I know. I love that business card scene. And it's hilarious because the cards are all essentially the same. And yet those little variations are so important to those guys and so important to Patrick Bateman that when he sees the best one, he nearly has like a heart attack over how good it is.
Yeah.
It's not, it's better than his.
I mean, we should probably read some Bret Easton Ellis books. Like that specificity is, I'm guessing, there in the book. And like, that's the thing that takes something from like, good to the next level, I think.
Right. Do you have a business card, Jason?
I do, but I don't really use it. I need a new one. So you want to make my new business card? Or fix me. These are two opportunities for you.
Or both, 2-for-1 deal. Yeah, I don't, I used to get business cards, like order them. I would get, the cheapest deal I could, but I don't have a current one anymore.
No one does it. Did Netflix is a joke this spring and no one was passing out business cards. You just exchange Instagrams or click on like their QR code and it gives them all like their social media, type things. Instagram's the new business card.
Oh, I don't have an Instagram either, so I guess I'm out of luck on both.
Well, that's why you're doing so poorly.
Yeah, clearly. So, should we rate this out of 5 chainsaw murders?
Sure.
5 business cards?
5 business cards.
5 business cards.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I gave it 3. I like it, but I like I said, I think there was more that could have been done with it that would have elevated it for me. Still fun. Great music. And of course, an excellent Christian Bale star-making performance here.
It is, yeah. I give it 3.5, and I feel like talking to you about it now and being positive about it. I would almost even rate it higher, but I do think it falls apart there in that final act. But very entertaining, and I think I liked it more this time than I expected. So 3.5 business cards for me. We're going to cut one of poor Bateman's cards in half, and he'll be horrified.
What a sin.
Yeah. Dave, how would you rate this?
2 in a row for me, guys. It's 5. Going 5 business cards. I was thinking 4.5, from last time, but why am I holding back? I'm going right to 5.
Yeah, I mean, hey, this was not only your pick, but your year that you picked. Yeah. So you would think, why not have at least 2 5-star movies this year?
Josh, is Dave a real person or are we just imagining him?
Good question.
Yeah. It's a long-term, people are listening to this podcast with lots of dead space. Like, who are they talking to? What's going on there? We'll come back and talk about the legacy of American Psycho. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of the year 2000, we've been talking about our producer David Rosen's pick, American Psycho. And I think part of the legacy here is that it did, it was very controversial when it came out. It was polarizing. And I think it has gotten that reassessment, and it's a cult classic. And it generally is assessed very positively, I think, across the board now.
I would agree. I'm wondering, Josh, do you think, Mary Harron was this kind of indie darling, right? And she co-wrote it with Guinevere Turner, another indie darling from the 90s. And do you think, we've talked over and over again about how women directors aren't afforded the same opportunities, but, they teamed up again for the notorious Betty Page, and then you don't really hear from her. She's working in TV, and then she made that miniseries Alias Grace. But I'm wondering if this movie kind of kneecapped her because of the initial response.
Yeah, I think so. She does work. It's not as if she never made another movie, but I do think that a male director would have been afforded more leeway. And I think you have the double whammy here of not only is she a woman, but also she's not an established director, right? If this had gone to Oliver Stone and he had gone ahead and made this movie and it had gotten the same kind of reaction, basically you can look at exactly that when Oliver Stone made Natural Born Killers and had that same kind of very controversial, very polarizing response, and it didn't kill Oliver Stone's career. So I think that that combination of being a woman, not being an established director, people just knew her for this, and she wasn't afforded those opportunities. She has continued to work. As you said, she collaborated with Guinevere Turner again on the notorious Betty Page. They also collaborated on a Charles Manson film called Charlie Says. And just fairly recently, she made a movie about Salvador Dali called Dali Land. She has worked in some TV stuff. She made a movie that I think is underrated, which is a horror movie called The Moth Diaries that was very poorly reviewed, but I think is quite good. So, she's had a career, but I agree that a male director would have probably gotten more opportunities off of this.
The other thing, though, is like the Betty Page movie was a big deal when it came out, right? And that didn't end up, that also fizzled. So I think it might be the combination of these two prestige projects back to back that just kind of didn't work at the time, but this one we know works, and it was overwrought with nonsense.
Yeah. I think you're right. And like I said, that movie, The Moth Diaries, for example, I remember got poor reviews. So if she had done another film that had been a big sensation, then yes, that would have pushed her back into that place, and she never really did.
Man, if you mentioned Oliver Stone. When he was attached, it was DiCaprio and Cameron Diaz.
Yeah, I don't think that would have worked out well. I really don't. I think that this turned out the way that it should have. So it was popular enough that they made American Psycho 2.
No, they didn't. Later. It's a lie.
Well, it was a direct-to-video film that was originally an unrelated movie, and at some point during production was kind of retrofitted to add in references to Patrick Bateman. And I watched this, and it's bad. So shockingly, very bad, starring Mila Kunis as a college student who kills all her rivals for this teaching assistant position that she wants, that with William Shatner, who plays her professor. And she's completely unbelievable as this dangerous killer. And the timeline makes no sense. They have her in the opening scene. She, as a 12-year-old, murders Patrick Bateman, which really just sort of
how does that happen?
She supposedly, her babysitter is one of his victims that he's got and goes on a date with, and the babysitter brings her along somehow, and he's got them tied up, and he's going to murder the babysitter, and she gets free, and she kills him with an ice pick, which I think was probably also they're trying to do a Basic Instinct riff there too, maybe. But no, it's a total mess. The timeline is nonsensical. They have a different actor playing Patrick Bateman in that prologue. Every bad idea that you can imagine, and even Mila Kunis has disowned it, which is really the only way that you can approach that. So
how many good Mila Kunis movies can you name, though? I can think of two.
I was thinking of Black Swan, and going into this, I thought, what, she actually is really intense and disturbing in that. Maybe she could pull this off, but she does not.
I think this and Forgetting Sarah Marshall are the two I think of.
Yeah, a very different kind of film. But at one point, Bret Easton Ellis said that he thought that the studio, I think it's Lionsgate, wanted to make a whole American Psycho franchise with different American Psychos in different cities, including Las Vegas. And I would still watch American Psycho in Las Vegas.
I would too. I kind of I know he's, let's just say, known for saying some wacky stuff lately, that Bret Easton Ellis. But I've been watching the Brat Pack documentary, and he's pretty insightful in that. And I'm very interested in him and this kind of world of coming up and being like a hot shot when you're 21 in the 80s, and he's an interesting character.
Yeah, I mean, and he's definitely a provocateur, not only in the books that he writes, but also in the things that he says. And he has his own podcast where I feel like every so often it's like, oh, listen to this shit that Bret Easton Ellis said on his podcast. So he definitely relishes that even now. We mentioned The Rules of Attraction, which is, I think, a more faithful adaptation of one of his books that he was more supportive of. The Informers is another adaptation of his. And he's worked also as a screenwriter, The Canyons, which he made with Paul Schrader directing. And the most recent that he wrote that I actually saw was this terrible, like straight to video serial killer movie called Smiley Face Killers that was just awful. But everything that he does is he's certainly like trying hard to shock people.
Bret Easton Ellis and Paul Schrader, they should have just had a videotape, a camera rolling on those two at all times. That's the movie there, right? So
yeah, I mean, that's a notorious flop, The Canyons with Lindsay Lohan, but it is, if not right now, at one point recently on the Criterion Channel. So again, talking about a reassessment there.
Yeah. We got to get to Paul Schrader. What are we doing?
Yeah, we'll get there. There's a lot of important filmmakers we've got to look forward to here.
None more important than Paul Schrader, Josh, ever.
I don't know about that. As we said, this is a huge breakout role for Christian Bale. I mean, we can name so many major films that he's been in and working with these big directors.
Obviously, we've talked about him before, I think, right?
I don't know if we have actually, come to think of it. But he won an Oscar for The Fighter, big on working with David O. Russell, working with Christopher Nolan on the Batman films. He was also nominated for American Hustle, another David O. Russell film, and for The Big Short and Vice, both directed by Adam McKay, another director that he's worked with a lot. He's about to play Frankenstein's monster in The Bride, Maggie Gyllenhaal's version of that. And given his known for his intensity and like immersing in roles and staying in character, I love to think of Christian Bale like staying in character as Frankenstein's monster, like having lunch and hanging out in his trailer and going to meetings and just, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, he's a top, he's an A-lister who's a great actor, right? He's a movie star and an actor, Josh. So, I mean, that would be fun to see also. Like you're saying, the other thing he's got going right now in development, Church of Living Dangerously, Josh. What do you know about that film?
I don't know anything, but I assume you looked something up about it.
How one of America's biggest pastors became a drug runner for the Mexican cartel. It's like The Mule without Clint Eastwood, and a church instead.
Yeah, and will he have a threesome like Clint Eastwood did in The Mule?
And will he say like, I didn't want you to just stare at that ass, go eat it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think he is known for having that sort of, he's like a Daniel Day-Lewis or something, but sometimes maybe that's like not well served perhaps. But I think as far as those really committed performances go, this is one of his best.
I would agree. And it shows like his ability to do comedy, which, is playing a truth, however absurd it is in the scene, as opposed to playing a joke.
Yeah. So American Psycho 2, maybe not very good, but the American Psycho stage musical, slightly more successful, began in 2013, written by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, with songs by Duncan Sheik. And it was nominated for 2 Tonys during its Broadway run, although it was not a very long run, but it's been revived multiple times. It was just produced in Chicago in 2023. And Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, the creator also of Riverdale. And they did a few times on that show. For some reason, they did a bit where the students put on a musical. And one time the students put on the American Psycho musical. So it was incorporated into an episode of Riverdale.
Yeah, but what a missed opportunity. Sorry, Duncan Sheik, but not getting Huey Lewis to write that music? Come on, dude.
I wonder if they offered that. And I wonder if they perform like that or one of those Phil Collins songs or the greatest love of all, the Whitney Houston song, which was the one they couldn't license for the movie. And they have to get this instrumental version of it instead. I hope the characters like sing those songs in the musical. That would be great.
That would be fun, Josh. We're all for musicals here on Awesome Movie Year.
Yeah, not as successful as the Billy Elliot stage musical that we just talked about that kind of overshadowed the movie there.
Yeah. Suck it, American Psycho, the musical. You're no Billy Elliot, the musical.
Yeah. So there's so many like major actors. We don't have to run down them all necessarily. I mean, Chloë Sevigny, I wanted to mention because she was really this like indie film darling. I mean, she's the one here, I think, that you expect to be in a movie like this. And she went on to do some other controversial films, including like Vincent Gallo's The Brown Bunny, and works steadily, including in like TV stuff now, and not everything that's weird and underground and controversial, but I think she still has that aura about her.
She'll be in Luca Guadagnino's new movie, After the Hunt. A college professor finds herself at a personal and professional crossroads when a star pupil levels an accusation against one of her colleagues, and a dark secret from her own past threatens to come to light. A sequel to a film we've covered here, The Hunt.
That's not right.
That's not true. But
for a second, I was like, really?
But it does sound similar in some ways.
Yeah, I suppose it does.
Wait, Josh, this is also weird because she was on Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix show, and now she's going to be in Monsters, the Menendez brothers show.
Well, that's because she works with Ryan Murphy constantly, and he's producing both of those. And she was on American Horror Story and the most recent season of Feud as well. So they obviously have a relationship. And speaking of Whit Stillman, she's great in Love and Friendship, the very, very funny Whit Stillman Jane Austen film with
Whit Stillman, my guy, Kate Beckinsale.
Right, exactly.
Josh.
Yeah, we got to get to a Whit Stillman movie.
It's Kate Beckinsale who's the star.
Kate Beckinsale, who is also really, really good in the main role there, and she plays Chloë Sevigny plays her best friend. So. Anything else you want to mention about the legacy of this film, Jason?
Josh, stop recommending American Psycho 2 to me. I'm not going to watch it.
As someone who's fascinated by these weird straight to video unrelated sequels to stuff, I am glad that I watched it. I would not actually recommend that anyone watch it unless you have a similar interest in that kind of weird curiosity, but it was something.
Hey, one thing we didn't mention. First, I wanted to say a little on Guinevere Turner because she was such an indie darling in the 90s. And if you're a fan of any of those Kevin Smith movies, you know, she's like Kevin Smith adjacent because they were all at Sundance in the same time. So that's pretty cool. And Gwen Turner, you know, Go Fish was the big movie that she co-wrote and co-starred in. There's a Mallrats character named after her, and you know she's in Chasing Amy and Dogma. But the other thing, Josh, that I wanted to say is we didn't even mention Willem Dafoe.
That's true. We didn't.
Yeah.
And I mean, Willem Dafoe is great, but I feel like his character is just kind of serving a plot function for the most part to remind you like, hey, somebody might be looking into this. And he shows up and he's a bit enigmatic about, as this private detective about what he's learned about the disappearance of Jared Leto's character. And Willem Dafoe is great. And we've talked about him, I think, at least once in like the Boondock Saints, but maybe in other things as well. He's fine here. This is not one of his like most memorable performances, but obviously he's gone on to many, many, many other great films.
He's the best.
He is indeed. So that is American Psycho, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can axe murder us online and on social media.
Josh, you know who would love the X platform? Patrick Bateman.
He would. Patrick Bateman would be a huge Elon Musk fan.
Right. So I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all the socials. Go for Jason on Letterboxd. We're at awesomemovieyear.com. An Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Bateman, the platform.
Yeah. You can find some old stuff from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on that Patrick Bateman's favorite platform, as well as at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. If you are on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any of the movies we talk about on this show, tag your reviews with Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think of the films that we talk about. And you can listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. And I guess I might as well plug my music since maybe Patrick Bateman would like it. David Rosen on all the streaming services. Just look me up.
And don't use it as a soundtrack to murder.
Or do.
Jason, what's in our next
He just wants
episode?
his music heard, Josh.
Right. Yeah. Whatever you want to do, whatever activities you want to engage in while listening to Dave's music are fine.
Hey, Josh, we heard the audience. They said we didn't get enough of douchey stockbrokers. So we're going to go to a cult classic, Boiler Room, and we're sticking in the same world.
So tune in next time for Boiler Room, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.